Hi, and welcome to everybody here tonight. My name is Deanna Fong, and I'm the literary editor of the Capilano Review. This reading series, Dear Friends and, has been a vital lifeline for me to stay connected to this city and this community that is so important to me. And I am truly exhilarated to be in your company tonight. A wave to all of those within our larger Hearts geography, to cop a phrase from Roy Keoka, who are joining us tonight virtually by live stream. Specifically, Trudy and Rhoda, who I ran into at Benny's Market today. So hi, Trudy and Rhoda. We're gathered here tonight on the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, nations who have been living, creating, and gathering in community on this land since time immemorial. As we bear painful witness to the violence, genocide, and land theft that is ongoing in Gaza, we're also thinking deeply as an organization about what it means to be doing this work of art making and sharing through publishing, as an organization primarily run by settlers within the context of settler colonialism and all its reverberations from Palestine to so-called Canada. We hold fast to the belief that poetry and art have the capacity to make space for actions of protest and solidarity, for expressions of outrage and grief, and for visions of a future of our refashioning. In her poem, Edging in the Abyss, forthcoming in this summer's TTCR digital folio on collective care, edited by Emma Jeffrey, poet Christina Hajar writes, I am brimming with the solace of surrender, the reverence of leaning in and seeping out, that I might live another day to gaze at the altitude of desire beyond the gardens of grief at my shore. The Capilano Review is a 52-year-old nonprofit literary and visual arts journal based in Vancouver. Originally founded by artist Pierre Coupé at Capilano College in 1972 and independent since 2015, the Review is dedicated to experimentation across genres, media, boundaries, and forms, with particular emphasis on promoting dialogue between the literary and visual arts. Each issue of the Review features poetry, fiction, essays, interviews, criticism, art folios, and artist projects by both emerging and established contributors, many who are based locally in Vancouver and in BC, and many from our wider geographic networks. Alongside our publishing program, we also partner with other organizations in the city, like Western Front, to offer a variety of year-round public programs, including the monthly reading series you're attending tonight, an annual writer-in-residence program, and numerous contests, workshops, and educational initiatives. All this being said, our work as a community-driven nonprofit is ever precarious, especially as the cost of production continues to steadily rise, and as we continue to commit to fair contributor fees and living wages for staff. Even as our small magazine has made incredible strides in recent years, even as it remains as vital and as vibrant as ever, we recently made the difficult decision to adjust our publication schedule to just 2 issues a year, down from the previous 3, to streamline costs as we look towards the launch of our much-anticipated art-driven special issue, Real Materials, this coming September. Our goal is to raise an additional $40,000 by the end of this year to balance our budget. So if you appreciate the work we do both on and off the page and want to see it continue apace, we invite you to consider extending your support to the Capilano Review before you leave this evening, either by purchasing a $35 print subscription to the magazine or by making a direct donation to become a friend of TCR. Our managing editor, Catherine, will be happy to chat with you or assist you at our book table beside the bar. And of course, if you're not able to contribute in these ways, we would still appreciate it if you would share the magazine with your family and friends or bring them along with you to one of these readings. Tonight, we're delighted to introduce the work by resident artist Jonathan Alfaro, who's here with us tonight. Jonathan has produced a new series of monotype prints entitled Daylight Lover, especially for this program, inspired by the imagined flourishes that might be found in the margins of love letters. Highlighting these marginal spaces as unexpected sites of intimacy and vulnerability, friendship and love, the work from this series on view tonight is titled Jungle Cactus. Thank you, Jonathan, for bringing your work into the reading space, and we look forward to the series' continued unfolding over the next 3 events. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to the Western Front for being such generous and supportive partner on this series, now for 2 seasons, in particular to Susan Gibb and Kiel Torres, who co-organized the series with myself and art editor Jacqueline Zongli-Ross, technical manager Ben Wilson, videographer Quilly Wu, photographer Rachel Topham. I'd also like to thank our managing editor Catherine Gear-Chambers, and finally the BC Arts Council for its generous support of our out-of-town readers. So some quick housekeeping before we get started for the evening. Each of our 3 readers tonight will be presenting for about 20 minutes with no intermission. 2 all-gender washrooms are located downstairs in the foyer. The washroom on this floor is unfortunately currently closed for renovations. We acknowledge that this physical space is not currently wheelchair accessible, so to everyone attending by live stream, thank you for being patient with us while we continue to work through all the necessary steps to make a large-scale upgrade to this historic building a reality. And with that, I will introduce the first reader tonight, Elisa Ferrari. Elisa and I have been in arm's length orbit for some time now, interested as we both are in sound, performance, and collaboration. I was floored when she asked me to speak on aux sends about my work with audio archives, and I'm always magnetically drawn to her creative work, in which the sonic and the dialogic are essential meaning-making elements. With that observation in mind, I wanted to introduce her with a quotation from Gemma Kurati-Fiumara, who I think we might share an affection for, which says, quote, "Through listening, a development unfolds that seems both open and enigmatic, clearly perceptible, but equally clearly unfathomable, a development of relationships that become knitted together into an ever-increasing involvement." Elisa Ferrari is an artist who works with sound, performance, and writing. Her practice and collaborations are concerned with memory formations, idleness, sonic sediments, translingual ecologies, somatic inquiries, and the infrasonic. She hosts Aux Sends, a quarterly radio series about experimental music, sound, and poetics on Vancouver Co-op Radio. She occasionally curates exhibitions and sound events. She lives as an uninvited guest on the unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories, and in Brescia, Italy, where she grew up. Here's Elisa.
Thank you, Deanna, for this wonderful introduction, and thank you, Jackie, for inviting me and for curating this series. I also want to thank the Western Front and all the staff, Ben and Keel, for organizing this series. It's a pleasure to be here and to be reading with River and Kaie. I'll read tonight from two different projects. The first one is a collaboration with poet Peter Kalie, and we were working on this project in 2015 when he suddenly passed, and it's taken me many years to be able to share this work. It's a translingual experiment and an artist book titled Ana Anani Amiata that will be published next year by Tender Button Press. Then I will present an audio collage that is part of a larger research and ongoing performance project titled In Increments of 13 that I've been using as a space to think about popular medicine in relationship to sound and translation, specifically focusing on the area where I grew up in Italy. The poems of Ana Anani Amiata were written between June 30th, 2013 and April 10, 2015, from a trailer indefinitely parked just a few steps from the collapsed entrance of a coal mine in the South Wellington area of Nanaimo on the east coast of Vancouver Island, and an overpriced, newly carpeted basement rental on William Street in East Vancouver. On the island, the essentials were a pack of B&H Mentals and a precious faded blue copy of Barbara Reynolds' English-Italian dictionary. We were never in the same room when the poems wrote themselves. Pete asked me to offer a title in English and then a word for each of its letters in Italian, my mother tongue. In exchange for the lumpy spine of an acrostic, I received fully formed verses that wove in and out of a diffracted dailiness I had only experienced with him on long walks in rural Nanaimo or in the kitchens of my hometown of Villa Carcina. With the new poem would come opportunities to make changes, add words, and play with the fluidity of grammar. At times, the West Coast rains and the Salish Sea created an undesirable distance. At other times, this liquid space amplified the subtle urgency of our exchanges. These supple intervals between transmissions were of suspense and permeability. I never knew how the words would return to me, what gregarious meanings would emerge. All of a sudden, an object became an action, a singular multiplied. In this fluctuation, I could experience vicariously the alchemical feeling of being a poet. With the first acrostics, Anna Ananiamiata introduced herself as the author of the poems. A bilingual woman, the age of your mother, living in a fictional nation-state, Anna Ananiamiata brought a sense of proximity and ease to our experiments. Her unapologetic syncretism punctuated the body of the poems. She nodded at elastic geographies and torqued grammars. However, as the poem's macaronic language developed, Anna Ananiamiata's presence seemed to subside. These owls. If you hear something strange in the woods, it's a raven. Vanessa Renwick. Diretti nowhere, pigeons briefly banded in Birdcage Park. Immagine of my long green coat pivoting like a lamp. Si parte dunque, to the little mirror and broken door, but a che fare? Hell is full of soft constraints. Vuote di cure, creatures like us can fold with padded paws, owe and crush in heavy syrup. Where granite glistens pink, listen to animate columns of Rachel's clouds dissolved in funk. Dal lato mio, I leave clouds and cages as I find them, silent spettatrice to the immanent crystals becoming. Code of conduct. Calma description unruffles the waves, narrows the eyes ovale, breeds cement archival dust so you don't have to. Gloves pick up lint, and sometimes the Book of Strangers have an interesting odore, which is why I like to brush them with my freddo nose and tongue. Dig in yourself and you will see. Come far concordare le idee? Oggi the polar magnet feels like a loose feeling nessuno could live alone. Dovrebbe aver retto, ma l'ululante estate has wiped everything in its path. Crudo, swollen and floating, so free, anche il trattore let slip its wet grip. Unfulfillable for Pasolini. Uovo-thin networks blossom like veins under flashlight. Nulla facenti crowd the corners loud but far away. Feroci shouts but no steel or brass or powder fight. Under times like this, better to keep moving anyway. Lucida carta across the dawn sky, forchetta of pencil scratch, clouds divide like lightning. Ispida seeks its level. It just pours into any liquido luogo it can, just as I fold my hands against the sun. Ancora cigarettes, ancora weed, ancora mosquitoes. Bola dome of the valley with smoke-trapped DDT. L'ultima volta, 1966, we followed the bug spray truck around. Elimina the shade and dust sheet. Remove the blanket. Analog infection for Kali. Abbastanza already, no need to make history your nemico. Dust balls of fine thread filter things. Perhaps, se tu avessi respirato more deeply of them, la lingua would have carried the clover forward. Ohimè, the carpet patterns held you in their sway. Gioco duro under the maples on another day. Innocuo until the hot tears of the higher better nonsenso bathed your neck and sweater. Fallaci carpet faces dare you to look up, and from your desk, and observe the swaying branches. Confesso to the breeze as this is a confession. 3 people on a bench, not in hell, with nothing in mente, but stitching the park to the edge of the lake. Oh, and the long ovals radiating from lake and track che non descriverò until you get back. Ridiculous object. Rischio of sleep, of waking up, of sitting up, of dreaming inoppugnabile whole room into existence without a floor. Dondoli gently on your heels as incisive irresponsibilities hover like little ships, centrali to the argument, un'estate you remember as it happens. Lupino shapes, hexagons, sweet pea lozenges. Ora, in the rising heat, the ravens find un blue envelope of drop and drag. Una sfera in the brush opens, defined by your wings. Osservai until the last star ate the last planet. Barba crackling in permafrost, jet lag of an astronaut, and the solid mental block of an oak table. Canina lopes gently in and out of scale, a light trema as high branches creak. Human supervenience for Kevin Davis. Hopla, I walked out, a sunflower hot gun to my forehead. Umidici hair through a crash head's ironic motto that sweat and sun have bleached and deepened. Ebbene, my pineal gland must be somewhere, comic slap. Ancora, marble walls with railings, cool on every street. No, e poi no, it's something you could say 1,000 times quickly. Sibilo at the end, though, if you were me. Ufficiale, where did you get such flat, sad feet? Your prestazione of offended innocence is a plinth and a platform for the entitled arabesques out of your barbecue mouth. Rotande brought you a set of steak knives, a set of teeth valvole, a leaf out of a sliding door cracks, a spelle in my lap, every time we hit a bump. Novità of a hot splash dabbed from the eye, intendo from the third eye on its stalk. Errore-filled structures blister in its side. Known for this, the angel cake of conversation, costante scan of 6-year-old, lucidly in a new room, does not errare merciless without compression or restriction. Toxins and hormones for Lisa Robertson. Terza generazione trades birthright for book sets. Ovest for burning sage, red drapery skies, bomber command jets. X come in Expo, Vistabex and Botox volumizzano the cloud's folds. Infinita guarigione, occasionale tenerezza, some loss of sensation. 900 points of entrance, mille notes you took sull'incontro in an insect's script. A Kreuzlingen and ant marches past con un cristallo di zucchero, nervosa but not as a hummingbird is nervous, del buon umore of a dog, the biting sarcasm of a raven. I balbettato the car to a rolling stop, OTD and into the spiraling North Shore Santa Ana's. RTF like lichen smears spill from a Balio laundromat TV onto the snow. Il movimento from half-mast fluttering to golf ball whites assume l'ufficiale postura of a supplicante, a good kneeling torso. Normolineo, gineceo lining, ma non specchi appannati. Epistolario shredded and lit up for Carnevale as slow snow melt drips from the spartiacque of the Cowichan e la confluenza of the Big and Little Nidinat. Still no word. Se fosse possibile to gather only what is relevant, no tergiversare but words as gnocchi, plain and light, homely crafts from illusty distant friends arriving in jeweled tissue, l'ultimo of the perfect cheese, a saffron sky. Le altre forze smear their snouts against the window. Notevoli hours spent excavating my resistance. Ora X marks the spot where I stopped. www.kingsgatemall.lostandfound.ca. Ochre over roofs silhouetted through sliding doors. Rossetto hints a dab on lips. Against eye and posture, to never deludere, not ever, the line of speech or the air it moves through. Gravely at Victoria, for the woman standing across the street. Geroglifici cracked by a hydro backhoe. Raduno the fragments into a wet sack. You look sad. Avanti, it's not as if one sort of ancient privilege is not much. Verosimilmente, another 5 millennia of big talk that you and I express and breathe in our every mood and gesture. So what? Lacunae are gifts, spaces where atoms speculate, where the helica of the clock stirs the dusty evening air and platinum grass. Y is your corner, zeta the door, A the archway, alt. Procedural sleeps are gaps too. When ti ho detto, I told you, Vittoria is never a good outcome for anyone. La città crawls with the winners of arguments, colonists. Tremo in the park with a leaking back of drywall. Oscurità spreading under the trees in patches. Richiamo left in a cave, scratched under a high bluff. Ibrido of letter and gesture, a speaking rock. Early autunno through the nose and paws and pads, then gone. A letter of the alphabet and syntax of a place. V as in valley. A valley through which a river moves. Once a rural site, then a site of extraction, an industrial paradigm. Steadily, geometries of capital reorganize the landscape. Roundabouts on roundabouts, goods are channeled upwards. A long line of foundries along the waterways. Flushed minerals, siderite, fluorite, sphalerite, galena, chalcopyrite, barite. The valley is narrow, a tight V. The mountainsides press in as one moves northwards. The letter V contains and separates. Matter slides towards the valley floor. Gravity gathers oral debris under the rocks of the riverbed. Gravity gathers oral debris under the rocks of the riverbed. Birds and trucks' song deposit on the skin of those who live in the valley. Their skin flakes off across property lines, between railings and fences, infiltrating. Ephemeral instruments and new cacophonies form. In the local dialect, the word ka means excavating. In the local dialect, the word ka means excavating. Saying it, ka, requires an abrupt exhalation, a decisive emptying out of the oral cavity. A displacement of breath. A spy, a sentry, a symptom, a bush. A spine, a sentry, a symptom, a bush. A spy, a sentry, a symptom, a bush. A spine, a sentry, a symptom, a bush. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy, for these flowers.
Thank you so much for that invitation to listen so deeply and to breathe deeply. So I think this event is the right opportunity to acknowledge the profound ways that our next reader, River Halen's work, shaped our most recent issue, It Is What It Is. When they judged our fall 2023 writing contest on the theme, I have to say what I want to hear. In their call for submissions, they wrote, "We are especially interested in reading works that implicitly or explicitly create a context for their own reception." The contest received a huge volume of submissions. Around the same time, River published the moving, timely, and necessary article, How to Push Back Against Anti-Trans Hate and Let Kids Actually Be Kids, on Medium. And among their recommendations was to affirm out loud that trans people exist. This relationship between articulation and concreteness, between saying and being, is the thread that runs through the pieces in the issue and is the source of its diverse formal approaches and political rigor. River's connection to us at that pivotal time, I think, made for something really special. We were so pleased to have published work from River's novel in progress in that issue, and we're even more pleased to welcome them to read tonight. River Halen is a writer, editor, and educator based in Tio'tia, Montreal, Canada. Their poems and essays have dealt with relation, ecology, transformation, and sexuality. Their most recent book, Dream Rooms, a collection of essays and poems, was shortlisted for the A.M. Klein Prize and selected by Renee Gladman for Artforum Magazine as a top 10 pick of the year. Halen is an acquiring editor for Brick Books and has taught sessionally in the Toronto Metropolitan University publishing program. Here's River.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Deanna. Thank you so much to everyone at both the Western Front and the Capilano Review for having me here. I'm in from Montreal, so I'm being put up in like the little room down the hall, which is just actually an amazing experience. I don't know how many of you, when you were small, like had a moment of believing that your teachers lived at school and didn't have houses. But like right now, I'm having the experience of being a performer in an art gallery who lives in the art gallery, and it's completely magical and surreal. And yeah, no, just a totally wonderful experience to be part of this. I'm going to start by reading a couple of pieces from my book, Dream Rooms. Dream Rooms is a book that I wrote in the years leading up to when I came out as trans, and is, like, in a broad sense, a book about not knowing large things and what the political application of that state of, like, not knowing something huge can be if you bring that mystery around with you to all things. The first piece I'm going to read is called Mirror. It was written originally as a description of a dance choreographed and performed by Hanako Hashimi Keynes in Montreal. And the dance was intended to be recorded only by, I was among several other writers and artists there who were writing descriptions or making drawings of the dance, which was the only documentation of it. Mirror. I believe the performer, when she says her dance will involve doing only those acts that bring her pleasure. I guess I'm more interested in how pleasure might look than in all the ways there are to trick me. She's wearing yellow shorts, the loose athletic ones that are, I think, associated with masculinity, but look almost exactly like a skirt. She's wearing them over black tights. There's a bit of yoga, then she takes her shoes off. That's interesting about the shoes. I mean, to think about pleasure as the removal of constraint. You could spend your whole life in that step, phase one, just thinking in the negative. Bye, pinching. Now it's a kind of crawling listening. Spider hands and an ear against the floor, clicking of nails on lino or whatever the tiles are made of. People don't think about tiles enough. These repeating patterns we're always contacting, so similar from building to building, modulating over time. What if we all looked at the floor all the time? Admittedly, the way she's hunching doesn't look like fun, but pleasure is a job sometimes. You have to process all of the shit that's been happening in your joints. You have to learn the range of possible sounds your fingernails can produce. If you don't know the range, what's the point in having preferences? Now I'm thinking about my own body in the uncomfortable folding chair. I can't help it. I uncross my legs. I'm part of the dance too. All of us in folding chairs are exerting an unhelpful collective gravity. The dancer could do anything, begin anywhere, except for the gaze of a bunch of people looking at her from the perspective of being uncomfortable. It's limiting. At some point, the dancer, if she's serious, will say goodbye to me. I'm ready for it. Okay, we're approaching a climactic moment. She's taken out a jar of strong-smelling lotion and is rubbing it into her hands, the only skin besides her face currently exposed. I feel like this would be a more satisfying climax for her if she were wearing less. The lotion could hydrate more skin, bringing more pleasure. But of course, it might not be a pleasure to her to be wearing less in front of an audience. This is a dance about existing in a situation, the kind of situation that encourages your pleasures to be more austere. The lotion has given its smell to the room. It's some kind of fresh spring floral muscle relaxant. Now pleasure is looking like a tough warrior stands taking up firm space with arms and legs, bending the knees and elbows defensively. I uncross my legs. You know what's kind of funny about the way she's holding her hands right now? It's a lot like the way I hold a pencil. My fingers are hypermobile, so to handwrite I have to overlap them, make my hand like a bird claw. Okay, we seem to be moving into bedroom mirror mode. She turns some music on, dance like nobody's watching. At my high school, we had an unlikely tradition. It was an annual drag competition for graduating boys. The winner got a crown and had to come back the next year to lip-sync a song, The Duke of Earl. My high school at that time was not a place where it was safe for anyone to be out as queer, or for anyone to admit that an event like this one was extremely queer. Still, the competition existed. A lot of athletes joined. They would practice, alone in their bedrooms or in groups in someone's living room, how to dance in a skirt, the way the performer is dancing in yellow athletic shorts. I uncross my legs. When everyone is watching, you have to be creative, ingenious about creating a sense of safety around your pleasure. She's lying on the floor now on her side in a pose I recognize from a different part of high school. A girl I had a crush on had read in a magazine about how to get the best curve. You lie on your side with your legs kind of wrapped to accentuate the hip. Voila, the best curve. She would practice this. What can you do with the best curve? We didn't really know. We thought it might come in handy one day for something to do with sex. Some clothes are coming off now, no more tights, thank God, no more curve either. The music has been turned off. Child's pose, total hiding of the face. It's a series of advances and retreats, taking up space, expanding in your body, then retreating from that expansion, which was never really encouraged, and so caused a new set of problems. Hiding is okay. It's okay. I uncross my legs. The next, thank you. The next thing I'm going to read is called Honeymoon. So there was never any pure time. If pure time exists for anyone, I do not know. I think of when you gave me my pet name after you came so hard that afternoon on the rented bed, the month or so when you would say things like, ooh, you like taking your credit card out in front of your friends, Power, if I tried to pay, or some sugar in your coffee, Power, if I tried to sip, or, oh, Power, your head hurting again, if I touched my temple, even or especially in public. And I would blush as if I really were a public utility, lighting up information for others to read. We were on a trip, the purpose of which was getting a copper birth control device extracted from my cervix without paying a lot of money in interprovincial medical fees. I was moved that you came too. I remember when I got the IUD, I thought it was a freedom, and it was like if you're already living in a mouse trap and someone offers a tiny mouse trap to go inside you, thank you. But when my body, which I understood increasingly was perfect, had to change so the cishet sex script, which I'd mostly always known was trash, could continue unmodified, was answerable only in terms of a history I was leaving on a trip with you, half insane I was to be so into you. I mean, you were unaccountably hot to me in the way that people sometimes are. Our voluptuous affection was a risk, our relationship volatile because the threat of it went everywhere, deep into some muscle, out again. 9 months after we broke up, I read a zine by Mira Bellwether called Fucking Trans Women. It had a diagram of muffing, which is an act that opens space where none appears to exist through the power of strategic touch. And it was not my body in the diagram, but I understood I needed to perform such acts and have such acts performed on me, that perfection was not a narrow but an incredibly expansive concept involving change/refusal to change/radical change/refusal/alteration and growth in a loop. Between getting off the bus and arriving in the leaf light on a bed at sunset in our Airbnb, a doctor opened me with a clear plastic speculum and pulled hard on a thread while I gasped. It did not hurt very much, though I'd been braced for something. The initial insertion had involved about 9 seconds of the most blinding pain I'd ever known, beyond what I'd imagined pain could be, the kind of vehicle the rich ride into space, just to see what it's like. I remember I was suddenly so sailing I understood leisure and that one could become addicted to the end of pain, the wash of chemicals pain excites, ending, which from the outside looks a lot like being addicted to pain, though the states are distinct. And as I write this, I feel ashamed the outer marker of my pain threshold is represented by a tiny T of twisted copper wire fanning out in me like a margarita umbrella wishbone. I mean, people give birth, for Christ's sakes. People dilate after vaginoplasty, and even me, if I wanted to tell stories about my body, I'm sure I could find a better one. I'm 30-some years old and have lived through some situations, but pain is a very clarifying state in that it removes the outside world entirely. You get to focus on your feeling. I was so completely in my feeling. Other people was gone, and so was narrative. Shame was a tiny speck down on the ground. It was the perfect lyric moment, the poem my endorphins wrote for the thread. I keep the syllables close. Would I repeat them? Maybe. Anyway, the removal took about 4 seconds and did not feel like much, and then I got to look at it, my first crush. It was a plastic T with copper wire coiled around, as I'd been told but hadn't yet witnessed, and then suddenly we were exiting the subway station, late in comparison to an invisible expectation our Airbnb host had been holding in his head, though we had not promised him anything except that we would be unpredictable for reasons he could not know. Time is funny, those moments you re-enter its tense. He was chilly with an underlying violence. He was hello in an aggression I wished to run from, but we'd paid. I thought about the question of what the fuck his problem was. It was either too much power or not enough, and the interesting thing was I had no way of knowing unless I asked, and he replied with the truth, which was not a thing I could imagine happening. How could I access a mind like Mirabelle Weathers? Where was the diagram of how to place my index? What if he was not the real owner at all, just some underpaid guy pretending to own a house in order to comply with a set of rules someone else was profiting from on the internet, and this charade created complications I could not know? Ownership was a lie we complicated by paying rent. We were the problem he could see. We could see him too. It was important to look. The lighting in the rented room was the kind you should never touch. A sunset was threaded crisscross like lasers protecting a work of art we lay down in it without closing the curtains. You were afraid to touch me because of what I'd just been through. I was afraid to be touched, though I was in no pain at all. Oh, I got the wrong. I'm sorry. Oh. Maybe I was scared, not of pain, but endorphins, some wires crossed. Anyway, I touched you and stayed partly hidden in my clothes while you opened up slowly to that amazing, stupefied state where the minute and the hour and the day are all the same. You have so much power over me right now, I'm going to call you Power. If you call me that, you realize I'll have to call you Glory. It was a dialogue that happened through our bodies when the veil was thin. We laughed for longer than we probably had earned. Our ignorance of the Lord's Prayer and the novel by Graham Greene had not spared us. There are some things you can't escape, so just incorporate. Wait for the next lover to take you to a doctor who will pull the thread. After you, I slept with a very feminine man I hadn't previously realized I was attracted to, but it turned out I deeply was. I admit I hoped he was open to trading forms, that if we fucked in just the right way, I could be a very feminine man and he could be whatever kind of ambiguous woman people were constantly mistaking me for. Of course, we never fucked in just the right way. I mean, we did. It was pure and endless. Thank you. I'm gonna read now. I'm trying to write a novel, but like I'm a poet, so it's taking me a really long time. I'm like, oh, events have to happen. I published a kind of drafty version of the beginning of it that I'm going to read from now in the Capilano Reviews issue. It's a really beautiful issue. I hope everyone buys it. Not I mean my thing, but but the issue as a whole. So the title in progress for my novel in progress is Thunderhead, and it's told from the perspective of an evaporated liquid entity that believes themselves to be a ghost, but is in fact a parallel version of a person who's continuing to live their embodied life, who happens to be trans. And I get this idea partly from H.C. Andersen's fairy tale, The Little Mermaid, which I think of as an extremely, extremely trans story, where the mermaid, after failing to seduce the prince, despite her beautifully reconstructed lower half, dissolves into foam on the surface of the ocean, and then instantly evaporates, becoming a spirit of the air. I feel like that part of the story is maybe less well known. So that's one antecedent for my narrator, and then another is a personal experience of violence that I lived through. But anyway, yeah, evaporated consciousness moving through the world. I didn't have to pay. I didn't have to worry about who would sit down next to me. I could go anywhere I wanted through the entire length of the locomotive, and I could get off whenever I felt like it, so long as I could find a crack somewhere, and there always was one. No need to wait for the train to stop. Most importantly, I wouldn't have to pee, hovering over that sloshing metal bowl, and no agent would consider me after each boarding point, choose a gendered title to address me by, and ask to see my ticket or scan the confirmation on my phone. I was like those people I had heard about. A friend of mine used to date one who rode around illegally on freight trains, except I didn't have to be physically brave either, prepared to get cold or arrested or injured leaping from a still-moving car. I felt a surge of sadness about the not needing to pee part, which was either ridiculous or totally understandable. I couldn't decide. Either way, I pushed it down. I went into the bathroom. I was thinking if I could remind myself how disgusting those places are, that it would instantly cure my sadness about not being able to pee anymore. The sliding door was ajar slightly and bounced a little with the motion of the train. There was a person at the sink with their pants unzipped. Oops. I had the impulse to retreat in the same sudden way I used to when I walked in on someone by mistake, but I paused and let it pass. In this phase of my life, I'm going to learn what people who unzip their pants in the train bathroom with the door open are about, I thought, and the thought brought a surge of delight. The person pulled their dick out, It was semi-hard already, and they proceeded to make it harder in their palm. Within about 30 seconds, another person joined them. I guess the open door was strategic to permit this person to enter, and not some exhibitionist thing or an accident. It was obviously not an accident, because the person entering quickly slid the door shut and locked it, securing them both inside, where they smiled broadly at each other. Shh, the first one cautioned the second, who was on the verge of giggling, a state that did not end for the whole time they were in there. They seemed to be a straight couple. I mean, obviously they were a straight couple, but I was wrestling with a moral code I'd made up about looking at people, not assigning them a gender from the outside. I felt more guilty about my impulse to label them than I did about watching them fuck. Their sex was boring to me, although apparently exciting to them. Probably the main thrill was the fact of being on a train in such a public place. The second person, the one at greater risk for this, didn't come, although they made a little crescendo of soft moaning as the other went down on them in an awkward crouching position. They exited the bathroom together. I followed them out, into a 5-person queue that had formed, including a parent with a child. There was another bathroom just opposite that the people in the queue were using, which was probably why no one had gotten quite frustrated enough to start banging on the door, but I could tell that one or two of the people in the back half of the line had wanted to. As the couple brushed past, people made raised eyebrows at one another, and the person with the child hugged them close. Beyond this, there was no consequence. The pair just went back to their seats and continued to kiss and nuzzle obnoxiously. It had everything to do, I figured, with the couple's straightness and whiteness. They were both white, and probably also their youth, late 20s, and relative conventional attractiveness, that nobody complained or tried to get them kicked off the train. This was the thing. I wanted to change the way people looked at each other, to make more space for everyone's potential difference. And I wanted this because of the way not having that space extended to me had turned out, badly. And then at the same time, what people looked like changed how other people treated them and what they could get away with. You had to be able to name that. I remember watching a movie once, or was it a book, about a gay couple who have sex in a train bathroom regularly because they have nowhere else to meet. They both live with their unaccepting families in different cities and have complicated travel routines, the logistics of which I don't remember. They do not find the train bathroom to be a thrilling place to have sex, I don't think. I think they find it stressful. If someone figures out what they're up to, they could be arrested. The thrilling part is not the train, but gay sex, or maybe their particular attraction, but either way, it would probably be better in a different place. Do straight people who have sex in train bathrooms know that they're copying queers? How many of them at some point question whether they've chosen the wrong half of queer sex in a train bathroom to imitate? Maybe it's more about feeling powerful, flexing, to do something not permitted for most people, but permitted for people like you. Back in the days that I worked at Celestial Cafe and Grocery, there was a flasher named Gary who would come in sometimes and whip his dick out at anyone breastfeeding. The management called the cops on him pretty often, but nothing ever came of it. We knew his name and what he looked like, but somehow couldn't keep him from coming into the cafe. He ordered coffees, and very often someone on staff ended up serving him, unwittingly, I guess, or because they couldn't figure out how not to. I'd almost completely forgotten about Gary. It's weird how stuff gets archived, then comes back to you when it's relevant. The possibility struck me as darkly funny that I would get to the store and find him still there, still flashing people, that in all these years no one would have figured out how to stop him. If Gary had been another kind of person, they would have figured it out. One time before I knew I was trans, I had sex with a man in a public bathroom. At the time I was out as bi, but most people who met me assumed I was a straight woman. And yes, I did think it was thrilling, and no, nothing bad happened to me, even though a security guard noticed what we were up to and encouraged us to wrap things up by walking into the adjacent stall. Had he meant to encourage us to wrap things up, or was he just interested? I feel mortified about it now, looking at this couple with their rumpled hair. The mortification is not about having had sex in public, but about having looked like this while doing it, having had this kind of effect on a room. It was me who started the bathroom sex. I wanted to specifically because it was something gay men did, because of a friend of mine who had shown me the glory hole in the upstairs bathroom of the university English department, and how jealous I'd been that he got to be part of this secret world running parallel to the rest of life, which was so boring. And then in the end, I did turn out to be pretty much a gay man. It's just that no one back then, including me, could see it. I don't know how to solve the problem of seeing and being seen. When I first became a ghost, I named myself Dead Mermaid, in reference to the H.C. Andersen fairy tale in which the mermaid dissolves into foam on the surface of the ocean after failing to seduce the prince. I hadn't lost a prince or anything. It was more about how the texture of my body felt. After she dissolves into sea foam, the mermaid instantly evaporates into the air, becoming a spirit with an entirely transparent body, just floating around on wind currents. And I could do that too. I could be liquid or I could be air. I had these two modes. I'm pink when evaporated and ruby-colored lying down, and this is because I'm made of blood. I prefer not to think about this. That's okay. People are also largely made of blood and mostly don't think about it either. I spend most of my time evaporated because it's easier to move that way and because it helps with not thinking about myself materially. I come from an event that I don't have good language to describe. I rotate a series of words in my mind. It was an accident, illness, operation, attack, mistake, conspiracy, murder, epic coordination of carelessness, or maybe several things at once. This event happened to the person that I was. However you frame it, it shouldn't have. Now the person is gone and here I am. I'm so much freer now than they were. Early on, I had to make a rule. Focus on the freedom, not the reasons why you have it. The rule was to prevent me from getting dangerously depressed or horrified by imagery. A person who's dangerously depressed has some options for escape. A ghost, too, more options in a certain sense. But I never heard of a way that a ghost can just leave if things get really unlivable. That's why I began my daily joy practice and positive thinking routine. In my old life, there were a lot of reasons not to call myself something like Dead Mermaid. I remember it was hard when I was trying to pick a name to balance my fear of being dismissed as ridiculous with my desire to be accurately addressed. There isn't a huge selection of non-gendered names in the English language. A lot of the ones that do exist refer to landscape features or weather patterns, sky, river, ocean, tree, rain, etc., colors, red, indigo, blue, or are funny little terms of endearment, bean, bear, or a syllable or two isolated from a word like a child would say, ale, car, Sam. And it's easy to seem unserious. Not that there's anything unserious about an ocean, a runner bean, or a child learning to talk. Now that nobody needs to address me, I'm free to be truly accurate in my naming convention. I figure if I ever do find myself in the situation of having friends again, or needing to talk to people for some other reason, I can just ask them to call me DM. Thank you so much.
Thanks, River. Spent a lot of time on the page with that text, and it was so wonderful to just hover alongside tonight. That was really a treat. Thank you. Our final reader tonight, Kaie Kellough, is also a friend from Montreal, and I have enjoyed the fluctuations of our conversations over many a croissant. What I love about our talk is how it seamlessly shifts scales from the everyday to the philosophical, to the nostalgic, to the speculative. This movement of working through how it all hangs together in real time, in dialogue, I think is as much a preoccupation in his work as it is in our interactions, as the personal scaffolds into the structural and the structural unfolds itself into our minutest and most intimate relations. This movement as method, not holding opposites apart, but instead allowing them to drift and blur into one another, creates such productive space for genuine listening, for curiosity, unsettling, tension, contradiction, and indeed rapprochement. Kaie Kellough is a poet, fiction writer, and sound performer based in Montreal, Canada. His work emerges at a crossroads of social engagement and formal experiment. His long poem, Magnetic Equator, won the 2020 Griffin Poetry Prize. His solo and group sound performances have toured internationally, and he is a vocalist for Fear, a non-net whose debut was released in 2024 with Constellation Records. Welcome, Kaie.
Thanks for that introduction. That was really generous introduction, and for the invitation. It's nice to be here, and it's nice to see everybody today. And thank you to the wonderful readings we've heard. Thanks to the Western Front. And I'm going to read a section from a work in progress, a new manuscript. And the manuscript is called Position, and it originated during the pandemic, so kind of peak pandemic moment around 2020, mid-2020. And I think there are moments, maybe social moments, moments of social crisis, but also moments of personal moments where we might feel the need to take stock of our lives or take inventory of our lives, determine where we're at and where we've been, if we're doing the things we ought to be doing, if we're successful people, and so on. There are moments that kind of amplify that impulse, I think. And I feel that that was one. I had turned 45 in 2020, so that was definitely a moment of amplified taking stock. But I don't like that impulse in a way. I understand the practical implications of it and the needs for it, but I find that the impulse is small and greedy sometimes. And this entire manuscript is sort of an attempt to recognize that impulse and bend it towards something else instead of bending it toward, a personal taking stock of life, right? But maybe looking at the world and taking stock of where one stands in relation to what's going on in the world, given where one has been. This is a section from that manuscript called Fluctuation. The aim is to introduce a fluctuation, a digression that veers out of the text. These are not straight lines, fluctuations in the cadence, deviations and returns. These paragraphs do not read left to right or stand justified on any side. They do not obey a firm form. And yet these uneven reflections should accompany the work and not perform in isolation. Their pulse should slide under and shift. The aim is not to preface or tame, not to nail the final word into the spine. What is written must remain in contiguous dialogue with how it was thought, why it was thought, and with the process by which it was forced. Because force is a way of making things cohere and for splitting apart. Since this writing drives toward a singular aim, not to belong, since this writing arises from since, from else, from somewhere, from some specific one, from an eroded voice, from circumstance, since it comes from the past spoiling into the present, and it is shaped by the variations in, the refuge from, the flight, the scholarships won, the children vanished, the space stolen, the applications accepted or declined, the names changed, the territory divided and stolen, sold, stolen, variations, the applications, the names, the territory escalating, the responses price, terse and negating, the incomprehension from an eroded, mounting as we step out of complacency and into a rogue simulation, the theory convulsed, the aspirations in suspension from one generation to the next, the concrete destruction, the worry powering the electric grid, the failures of infrastructure, the unbridled speculation, the crumbled diction, the compassionless void in the blue chest, the assumptions unleashed, the addiction to inequity, the imploded Bitcoin, the fermenting century, etc., etc., since this writing arises from century, from since, from else, from somewhere, from someone, those locations must be made explicit, must be undressed here, but also throughout this negation of belonging. Subtler than pain is a nausea that borrows from the language of the user, the pundit, the weaponized bot, the coercive advert, and produces sentences gestated in rubble and lamentation, undernourished dreams, debt, rejected, into a readable ill, a fluctuation, betweens. The sentences are work, always becoming and never arriving into the dominant we, of anthems and others. Others produce discomfort in the we, produce anthems to rebuke anthems, produce sentences in the we, produce sentences gestated in always, becoming and never. Certain conventions produce becoming and never, discomfort. For instance, the bias that favors arrival over distance, the product over the process, the written, celebrated as pure individual product, while the collective wrought recedes into a past tense of invisible labor, the product, dislocated, clean. In this way, publication differs from a performance. In performance, the process may be refined, but at least we see it happening. In some measure, the performance is a reconstruction of the process. Reconstructed each time the performance is staged, process produces error. Immanence stresses process and produces error, repeats and codes impurities into the form. Since publication launches a work beyond its process and is considered the point at which a process is no longer ongoing, then whatever is published can never be ongoing, if continuation means it is now outside of, if completion means it exists with its labor erased, because, to personalize the matter, I am labor, I have been sold for energy, I continue. In this writing, at least I can choose how to steal back, so I can't be ripped off by progress. This work is always in progress, but it is not progress. My energy is always being stolen back by me, or rather, shunted away from purposefulness, away from use, shunted off into this work, so at least that small part can't be used to power digital empires, multiply discord, enslave who to MasterCard, or innovate apartheids. This writing started in pandemic limbo in 2020, when downtown was a vacant, through which only those who had no would stray, and those who were paradoxically non-essential morally froze and worked from our queasy rooms, and some of us repeated, "You know," and "We're fortunate," and "back to normal," and children were born, new iPhones launched, and there is a point on the journey where the present accelerates and veers into another experience, and when, around that bend, we look back and see the chronology of our bright ideas, spotlighting this falling action. To put it another way, we find ourselves confined by a reality so rare that it only enters popular culture via the sci-fi flick or the paperback, the thriller, the limited series suspense drama in which you are not the protagonist, but the disempowered lazy eye. Suddenly we are living a plot, and the seniors' residences were locked, and the nerves singed, and for a moment we stood incredulous as the times curdled, nurses took sick leave, and superheroes from the Marvel universe failed to intervene, and we vomited the popcorn and drew back, and we were missing our pith helmets. Our accounts had been hacked, passwords and usernames appropriated and dispossessed, and those who had the means sold and fled, and we dreaded the daily glance at the little red digital graphs, dead and time, balanced on the axes, X and Y, and we secretly cheered the end. And when the prices started to whisper collusion, and we secretly cheered the end. And when the prices started to whisper X and Y, and viral conspiracies spread, and those who had the means sold, and we dreaded, and viral conspiracies spread through the wireless air, and somehow the vaccines were feared like truth serums. in the test tubes of grinning supervillains, and the eyes of the pharmacist narrowed with a mad science fever as QAnon sabotaged the formula. At the time, I saw an image, a black and white photograph of a cargo ship veering off course, with a white churned trail of ocean foaming behind it, and the boat's iron bulk teetered on its side, about to capsize. Shipping containers froze mid-collapse before they tumbled overboard. A stack of industrial air conditioners tilted. The ship and the water frowned into a terminal opacity. And the counterfeit Amazon price tripled, and armies teetered on the counterfeit Amazon price. On the blink, tripled, and when the counterfeit supply chains and myths and when capsized on the open, and modernity fouled off track, and the shooter pulled on his balaclava and entered the underworld, the infrastructure of our conversations, and armies teetered, and when supply chains and capsized, and the infrastructure was dissected and delivered to our conversations, to advertisers whose digits twitched in the fine print, and maybe with some additional Amazon, with some additional price triple, with some additional pressure, was dissected and delivered, these soulless clicks might have given way, maybe to longer fangs and more rapacious expertise, and when, back to normal, was deployed like coercion, like brute reassurance, back to normal in articles and who's normal, and when total digital hegemony was temporarily achieved because browsing united time and money in a material dream, and the music ceased, and quiet quitting dawned, a new music, a new cease, a new attitude interrupted this contextual reflection with a question. If this is modernity, then whose is it? Is who? Is shopping in my head? Is who? Is talking? Because whose story? If this isn't a story, then how do we establish our empire? Who is we and where? I was talking to a novelist in a hotel in the formless gray of late November at a literary event north of Quebec City, in the passage of snow and pines that rises up and spikes at clouds, between truck stops and hot dog restos. And for the entire trip, I kept considering that I am not of this place. Yes, born on, but this is not mine. Her concern, as she put it, was le contemporain, how to write the current moment. And I thought that my concern is similar, but approached as an outsider, and not as one who does be knowing. My current moment can never be mine. It can only be the current moment, only a current moment, because I am other. I'm one person, perhaps less than by some historic measures, person, but a person cannot be current, cannot be coherent, alone. I, and by extension, this collection of language should represent le contemporain in an anonymous, general sense that has little to do with me personally, because I am not the author, but the participant. Jane Cortez notes, because I am not a bystander. My presence can't be external to the culture. It struggles under the same knee. It struggles under a different knee. I, and by extension, this collection of language, should not represent le contemporain, even if I can identify certain attitudes and challenges of the present moment that distinguish it from another, that distinguish it, and even if from I can reach into it and extract its language, my experience of it is only one from experience. So what I write must call for a multiplication of expressions, as many as there are anonymous currents in. And I was awake late one night, microdosing television, while watching videos on YouTube on my laptop and Instagram on my tablet, then texting relatives in another time zone, multiplying distraction and fragmenting my right mind. I felt like I was brimming with voices and headlines, moving mouths and news banners, information moving inside me, and I opened a Word doc and realized that I collect the language of the movement. I listen to my time. No, I listen to the time that belongs to no one. And so, this is not written. It is collected and then arranged to move with a broken, repaired gait, to shuffle and break in time. And I, if writing, then my job is to undo. If writing, to leave unfinished, and I, to undo rave at the root of the assumption, because beneath the artificial poise of a text, the low end rumbles and disrupts the supply chain. Because beneath the artificial poise of a text, the low end rumbles and disrupts the unfinished, and if not undo, I then at least introduce a fluctuation, a fissure through the infrastructure, but not for no light to enter, for the fissure to rumble, the structure give. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaie. Man, it's a trip to go back to that, the affects of that time. It really. Well, thank you, Elisa, River, and Kaie, for sharing your work with us tonight, and to everyone here for making space for these words. If you enjoyed tonight's reading, please mark your calendars for the next event in this series on Thursday, September 5th, taking note that there will be no reading in the month of August. That evening, we will be welcoming visiting author Jerry Shikatani from Toronto, alongside some special guests. We look forward to sharing the full invitation with you in the coming weeks. And again, if you enjoyed tonight's free reading, please consider showing your support for the Capilano Review by making a donation or purchasing a year-long magazine subscription. Jacqueline and Catherine will be at the merch table all evening long. We'll be happy to chat with you. We also have our latest spring 2024 issue for sale at the table, It Is What It Is, as well as artist prints, tote bags, and other merch. So thanks again for being here. Have a wonderful evening.